So, I shot a previous video about using weight distribution hitch with airbags that got some questions and a lot of comments, some concerns, and I wanted to see if I could clear some of the confusion up about how I use a weight distribution hitch with airbags. And this is, to me, the safest way to do this and the most efficient way to do this, but this may not be for everybody. So if you disagree or don't like this, please share your own thoughts and comments on it. Now, the first thing I want to go through is traditionally how, if you have a weight distribution hitch with your half ton and your towing, how you would set that up with airbags. Traditionally, what you would do, you would measure the height at your front fenders, and there's plenty of descriptions out there on the internet, but the height of your front fenders at the level of the front axle. And I'll show you how to do that here in this video. We look on flat ground when we're here, go up, we can see we're right between 36 and 5/8 and 36 and 3/4 on the fender height, and that's what I want to get back to when I go ahead and load my truck up. What I don't want to happen is for the back end to lift and cause pressure to come off the front end. The second thing that you would do once you've measured that height is you would go ahead and load up your vehicle, hook up the tongue from the trailer to the ball hitch on the back of the truck. And then once you've done that, then go ahead and load up your arms from your weight distribution hitch until you've adequately restored the height of the fenders at the level of the front axle. Meaning, for example, with mine, the front axle unloaded, the fender height is roughly 36.5 inches. So once I load my vehicle up, more weight's going to be distributed onto the back end. That's going to raise the fenders at the front axle, and they'll go up usually, depending on the size of the trailer, maybe let's say an inch at the front axle, up to 37.5. Without the weight distribution hitch bars, this is my unloaded travel trailer, and I don't know if you can make that out or not, but you can see it's got this angle, and then it's got this angle, and if we look here, we can see why in the rear wheel well, we can see that it's much closer, and we can see that we're lifting up here. If we look here, we can see, as opposed to the 36.5 that we were earlier, now we're right at 37.5. So now about an inch off, and we've unloaded weight from this front axle while we put increased weight on that rear axle. Well, what I want to do is get back as close to 36.5 as I can, and the way I'm going to do that is by using those weight distribution arms with their springs or chains to lift on the back end of the truck, restoring the weight to the front end. And I know when that's happened is when I get back to about 36.5 inches. So that's traditionally the way you would do that. Then, if you have airbags, you would load your airbags just until they barely begin to move the front axle just a little bit, or begin to move the back end up just a little bit with the airbags. Now, the problem with that traditionally is that once you begin to load that back end up, it takes tension off your weight distribution arms, and so you're not restoring as much pressure and as much of the weight, carrying weight, back to the steer axle as you were originally. So this is the traditional method. I don't really like this method. A number of people criticize the way I do it, but I'm going to explain the way I do it step by step and why I think this is a safer method. I think the important thing to understand is there is no adequate authority on this. There is no rule on how you should do this, right? There's only recommendations that are out there in public forums online, like what you're watching right now. So we all have a right to our own opinion, and you have a right for yours to be wrong if you disagree with me. It's, as simple as that. But here's how we do it, or at least how I do it. And I think it's a very safe route. So I know with the type of travel trailer I'm taking, which is a 23-foot Airstream, it's going to come in between unloaded about just under 4,500 pounds, and fully loaded, it's going to come in probably about 52 to 5,500 pounds, depending on what I'm carrying. Traditionally, I know that's going to, in my Toyota Tundra, require unloaded about 20 psi in the airbags to level things off, or 30 psi in the airbags when everything's fully loaded to level things off. Pretty simple, right? First thing I do right, is as I load up my airbags, right? I get those set where I want them for what I'm towing. And so I have Firestone Ride Right airbags, and what I will do is I will inflate those. Let's say I'm taking a full travel trailer and a full loaded vehicle. I will inflate them to 30 psi. As I'm doing that, the other thing I want to make sure of is that the ball height on that's attached to my hitch, the hitch ball, is just at or just below. Usually I like to be within a ½ inch of the tongue weight of the trailer when the trailer is level. This is important. You want the trailer to be level. You want the ball height to be just at or below that. So if this is the trailer hitch here, I want that ball to be right there or just right here before I connect the two. Now, once I make the connection, of course, the back end of the truck is going to go down. And then what I'm going to do is once the two are connected and the hitch is locked into place, I'm going to jack it up and begin to elevate the back of the truck until I have enough space to load my weight distribution arms to where I determine that once I set the truck back down, it's going to rest level and the trailer is going to rest. What you see right now is that my Airstream and my tow vehicle, my Tundra, are pretty darn level here, and I have 30 psi of air in my rear airbags. That keeps it set at the right height so that when everything's fully loaded, this is the way it should sit. With the proper amount of weight on the weight distribution hitch, as you can see, the truck sits nice and level, Airstream sits nice and level, and I've got weight being returned to the front end. As you can see, I'm not sagging. And that's what I want with that. Now, again, with my system, and I use a Kurt system. I like the old school system with the chains. For me, it works well with what I do. Certainly, you can use a blue aux, you can use an equalizer, you can use whatever you want, but this is the system that I like. Now, once those chains are on, and once my weight distribution is hooked up, everything should be level. And I've checked that I've returned to that 36.5 inches roughly that I was at the beginning. On the driver's side here, right in line with the axle, you can see I'm right at about 36.5 inches. In line with the axle on the passenger height. And you can see we're at right at about 36 7/8 roughly. Now that everything's hooked up, everything looks level to me, there's one more step. I got to go through the cat scales with it, right? At least one time to know that I've set this up and it's done right. When I go through the cat scales, there's a number of things I'm looking at. First off, I want to make sure that the weight is restored to my front end. That's first and foremost to me. Now, my Toyota Tundra, typically what it comes in at with my wife, myself, a full tank of gas, all the gear we're going to take, etc., loaded up in the vehicle, is it comes in right around 6,600 pounds. And as I've loaded it, typically it's going to be right around 3,000 pounds, maybe just under on the rear axle, and it's going to be 3,600 on that front axle. So that's what I want to restore that front end to, is close to 3,600. Now, if I've done that, I've made sure everything's level, it should come in pretty close to that, and it typically almost always does. Once I've got that, then I want to look at what's the weight on my rear axle. Of course, that's where I want most of the tongue weight of the trailer that's come on. That's where I want most of the tongue weight to be going. And the good news is my truck has a 4,150 pound rear axle, and typically it's only coming at 3,000 before it's hooked up to the trailer. So that's plenty of room of tongue weight of what I'm going to add to go ahead and load that up. And that works really well also. So now what I've done is I've moved out that step of, okay, I'm going to inflate the airbags after I've loaded my trailer up. Now, theoretically, you could overshoot and you could overload your trailer, and then assuming you're going to inflate your airbags to where you're at the right number, but that just doesn't seem as practical to me as it does, hey, inflate the airbags first, get the airbags to the level that you want them at approximately, so you're not making any big adjustments. Go ahead, load everything up, make sure it's level. If it's not, redo it. You know, change the number of chain links a little bit, change the pressure in the airbags just a little bit, but do what you need to do to get that height, to get the vehicle level and to get the height restored at the fenders for that front axle. And once you do that, and if both vehicles, both the tow vehicle and the trailer are level, and the height is restored at the front axle, you'll be surprised. You'll go through the cat scales and those numbers will be pretty darn on, and you'll have the weight and pressure back to the front end of that steer axle. All right, so let's go through our outline then of how we're going to do this and in what order. So order number one for me is to inflate the airbags to the approximate PSI I think they're going to need. And so typically for most half tons, you're talking, if you're using an aftermarket airbag, it's going to be between 20 and 30 psi. So, but for me, and start at 25 if you want, because maybe it needs some tweaking, and 25 is a nice midpoint to start your tweaking at. But start with inflating the airbags. Once you've inflated the airbags, you go to your front of your truck at the level of the axle, so it's the center point of the wheel. You're going to measure the height of the fender, either side, both sides really. Go ahead and measure. It should be pretty close. Tundras are known to have a little bit of lean to the driver's side, at least the second gens are, but go ahead and measure that. Once you have that fender height, now go ahead and hitch up your trailer. Now before you hitch up your trailer, you want to make sure that the hitch ball height that's coming off the back end of the truck and the tongue height when the travel trailer is level are at the same level. So once you've done that, now you want to go ahead, connect them. They're going to lower. Once they're lowered and things are locked into place, jack them up together enough so that you have enough slack that you can put on your weight distribution arms. Once you put on the weight distribution arms, lower it again, make sure everything's level, and then go measure the front end of the fender. Go measure the front end at the fender again. You want the height of the fender again at the level of the front axle. If all that's lined up, you're probably set. Now you're ready for the final step, which is to drive through the cat scales and make sure everything's set where you want it. So that's why I find this to be the safest way for me to do it. If you have questions about it or concerns, please feel free to ask, feel free to comment. And the more we share on here, the better this information gets. And hey, it causes me to learn some things too. So I appreciate you watching, and thanks for the comments. Appreciate it.